I think we still black.
Listen, somebody asked me, Adolphus. They said every show, and these people listen to the show religiously. They said, why does Mr. Pruitt? They said Mr. Pruitt have to always say, "And we're back." Like if we hear you, we know you're back. So I'm just saying, people are listening, and words are important.
And you know why we tell them why we back?
Why?
Because from week to week, we don't know when they're going to give us the axe.
Listen, I am the Reverend Darrell Gray, and I am in studio with
Adolphus Pruitt. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have pretty much of I think it's a serious show, Darrell. There are a lot of things going on in the world, and even in our city. And one of them is this school board race that's coming up, Darrell. It's school board race. And, every once in a while, I get a call, and folks say, "You ain't want to chat?" And I'm like, "Listen, let me see if we can squeeze you in." And today, there's a young lady. And when I say young lady, I mean young lady compared to me, Darrell, and BJ.
Oh, compared to us? Come on, man. I mean, listen, look, compared to us.
Yeah, a young lady by the name of A.J. Foster. And she is a very, 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 I think, unique young lady.
Okay.
Highly intelligent, very professional. And I just thought that, when she wanted to have a conversation, I said, well, let's have this conversation. I would like folks to get to know you.
I think you did the right thing. I mean, from the very beginning of this show, Adolphus, you've been consistent on a whole lot of things, but I think you've been most consistent on education and the need for education and quality education. And so I'm not surprised that it seems as though, we've dedicated a lot of time around the area of public education, quality education, adequate education, affordable education, and people who seek to be responsible for the educational systems and environments for our children. But I want to agree with you, too. Ladies and gentlemen, now you can't see it. But when Adolphus said young, I asked the young lady, I said, wait a minute, now you're running for office, and of course we can't endorse, but we can support. We can't endorse. But I looked at her at Pruitt and I said, you're running for school board, but you've just been out of high school for 2 years. So I agree with Pruitt. Tell us something tell us who you are, and I want to know why.
My name's A.J. Foster. I am a St. Louis resident, born and raised. I grew up on the south side, specifically the State Streets on Oregon. I'm a product of St. Louis Public Schools, graduated in 2016 from Metro Academic and Classical, which is one of the magnet schools in the district. Went on to get my bachelor's. Kind of was in the classroom formally and informally teaching pre-K 3 literacy. Found my way somehow, some shape or fashion in a math class for middle school, but really enjoyed kind of seeing the clear outcomes that I could make. Went on to graduate, moved back to St. Louis because I love it so much. We have the best food in the world. And so started working for education nonprofits, trying to figure out where I can get involved in education because I knew I wasn't a certified teacher. Kind of moved on and really worked on the financial operations for an education nonprofit, supported the recruitment of first-year teachers and really their development in passing their certification exam in the state of Missouri. From there, I started working at the Center of Youth Voice and Research. So really, again, kind of diving into what our students believe and what they want to see schools look like, specifically public education and public schools. Right now, I'm working at another nonprofit, global one this time, though, working at the Center of Digital Equity. And so working really closely with school districts, school board members, superintendents to really figure out how we can procure equitable contracts. And when I say procure equitable contracts, I mean making sure that we are not partnering with vendors or organizations who just don't have our best interests at heart. And so have really enjoyed kind of that work, enjoyed kind of meeting with superintendents across the country, and really building out frameworks on how they can really measure student outcomes at the district level.
You know what? Wait a minute. We're going to bag up there. She said she graduated from Metro High School.
I know, I heard that.
And she called it a magnet school
said
and
it
all
was
these
a
other
magnet
things.
school.
So let's be clear. I just want to make sure, I'm going to help you with a little history, Miss Metro alumni.
Yes, sir.
I was in grade school and high school many.
Let's just say it predates
years ago.
2016.
Well, put it this way. We rode dinosaurs to school. Well, that's where BJ and I were in high school
BJ
together.
said,
freshman
why'd
year.
you put him in there?
Well, because he's old as I am. But Metro.
You don't want to be by himself.
I know. Especially on that dinosaur.
But Metro used to exist as a high school over on Shoto between Jefferson and Compton. And magnet schools didn't even exist back then. And we used to tease, because I was living in the Clee town, we was at Southwest. I left Beaumont and Southwest. We used to tease the people in our neighborhood who went to Metro, because in order to go to Metro, you had to be highly intelligent to get in. Am I right, BJ? You remember Metro, BJ?
We used to call them gifted schools.
Yeah, that's exactly what we called it.
That's what we call it.
Gifted
That's what we.
schools.
Yeah. So and even
Right.
and what's amazing that even still today, Metro is the highest ranking and performing high school in the state of Missouri, folks. So the St. Louis, let's be clear, it's a St. Louis public school.
Right.
It's a St. Louis public high school. It used to be partially in the South Side ghetto. Now it's in the Midtown, the Central West End.
Central West End.
They moved on up
Yeah.
like the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
They moved
Central
on
West
up.
End.
But it is still the highest ranking after all of these years. So she comes from a very good school. But here's my question. Here's what. Let's jump into it. What do you think is wrong with public education today?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. I think the bad rep that public education gets, and so I am a firm believer in the power of public education. If we have free resources in our neighborhoods that are providing access and quality education, there is nothing wrong. It's about what resources we're giving students, we're giving schools and administrators to really govern and function a full school district. I think that public education has many challenges, and those challenges aren't unique to St. Louis City, though. They're across the country. They're across the world, honestly. And so I don't think anything is, quote, wrong with public education. I just think that it gets a bad rep. And there's a lot of choice out here. There's charter, there's parochial, there's homeschool, there's deciding not to go to school, right? If you choose so, but necessarily wrong, I don't think.
Yeah, but and I hear you, and as you said, it seems to be something that crosses the country, but there is a decline
For sure.
in I'm not going to say decline in support for public school, because I think that there are a lot of us who attended public school who still support public school, but it seems as though there is a competition, and you mentioned all of that, and so when you privatize, when you make an entity for profit. I mean, our school, we're down to what, 18,000 now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're down to
A
18.
little over 18.
We're down to 18,000. We're still trying to figure out who's going to drive the bus.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out who's going to drive the bus. We've, and God bless them. And for those who do it, my hat's off to you. We've had turmoil. We've got board members resigning, talking about unethical. So it does go back to my question. and you probably answered that just in introducing yourself, but I want to make sure our listeners are clear.
Mm-hmm.
Why go into what seems to be chaos? The situation, the environment. I can understand wanting to do it, but here, in the midst of all of the chaos, why? I think people want to know why. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to throw yourself in the fire?
Yeah. Well, I'll just plainly say I've been formally and informally studying on what a school board does, what school board governance is for the last 3 to 4 years. So this was way before I was even eligible to run for school board. It just kind of so happened that we have journalists who do their jobs and they show up to school board meetings, whether good or bad intention, they still show up and they figure out what the issues are. But these aren't issues or challenges that are new or unique to even this school board.
Okay.
And I can talk about it a little later, but it's so much chaos right now because there are no clear, updated policies in place to hold school board members or administrators accountable.
Okay.
These policies haven't been updated since about 2007. We're sitting in 2025. And so I think it's more so we just caught it now. It's being brought to light. And so the question of why throw my hat in the fire, why throw my ring in the fire, one, I have capacity. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I don't own a home, but I'm a taxpayer. I have nieces and nephews in the district. And I tell people all the time, if you ask anybody, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you graduate college? It was easy for me to say I want to serve on the school board. We just don't get paid for it. So I got to pay the bills, right? I got to have a 9 to 5.
Yes, you do. Got to eat.
Got to eat.
You know what? We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on Point Black. And we're back. Hey, Daryl?
Adolphus? Listen, I was in there listening. Said Miss Foster, and she said, and I asked her, and I wanted to know, and she said, "Listen, I'm single. I don't have any children. I don't have a mortgage, but I got capacity, and I'm compassionate." And I think that those are the qualities. Those are the qualifications. I think, and it was interesting that she said, Adolphus, the policies haven't been in place. We're dealing with, again, antiquated policies. And if you don't have the policies and procedures, it does allow people, but number one, I think it allows people to kind of go off track. But the other side of that is, I'm not saying it gives permission for people to go off track, but it also provides an excuse when people go off track. So if you talked about, if Adolphus, which he probably will, I'm gonna beat him to it. If he asked you, like, if you had to name 3 or so priorities, you know, you let's say you get elected, and your first day in. Now we don't expect you to answer the phone at 4:00 in the morning,
Right.
but you get elected. What are the first few things that you want to prioritize?
So I think it's important to level set that regardless of whatever singular campaign you're running, when you join the board, there is no I in team. The priorities that you have
But
have
Kobe
to be,
said there's an I in win.
But you know,
Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
That's
Okay.
true. That's true. But it's no I in team, right? Like
Right.
you have to. You now are governing on behalf of a school district that already has a vision and mission set in place.
Okay.
And so
Fair
all
enough.
these singular, this is my platform, this is my priorities, that's not going to matter once you're elected and you are serving on the board. And so main priorities and platform is really the role of a board member, ensuring that the financial well-being of the district is intact according to state. The second is really centering our students and teachers' experiences. We are dealing with striking population decline in the city of St. Louis, but also student enrollment decline in public schools. And our teachers are not wanting to stay more than 2 years to teach. So retention is very, very low. If we don't have students and teachers that want to be in the building, we can't occupy the building. That's just simple math. And then the third, I think, is really just ensuring that the general public, taxpayers, city voters or not actually, if you pay taxes in the city of St. Louis, you are a stakeholder and you can make decisions for your school district. Regardless if your kids attended or not, you still pay for public education. So making sure that we are very, very aware of just our collective power as a community, because again, I mentioned there's a lot of policies in place and practices in place that doesn't allow for our community to even give feedback appropriately. And so those are, just 3 priorities, but just like the president, you have to have a 100-day plan. And one big thing that I'm always saying and always preaching is you have to be in school buildings. If you're going to govern a school district, $1 billion industry, you need to go see the actual buildings that you're working with. Right. You need to see the administrators. You need to see the teachers. You need to see what learning looks like. And that's across the city. And so my biggest goal, my first day one priority is definitely visiting our schools, visiting our teachers, visiting our administrators. Because priorities may look different on the campaign trail than on day one of school.
Well, I got a question. And you can take this question and you can break it down in levels, or you can put it solely in one spot and leave it. It don't make me a difference. I'm dying to hear the answer. Who is responsible for kids failing in school? Who's responsible? Who? We hear this thing about accountability. Who do we hold accountable? Who is responsible? Right. And if there's multiple layers and level, let me hear. But who's responsible?
That moment of silence from everybody.
I know. We're all waiting.
Was that a question for her, or was that a question for the group? Was that directed to her or the group?
You got to answer. What do you think?
Matter of fact,
let's let it be a group.
You sit back and listen.
Yeah.
We're going to let the group
come on, BJ.
Come answer. Then you,
come on, BJ.
You fix us.
You clean it up at the end. Come on, BJ.
Yeah, I'm going to let him clean it up.
Go
I know he's going to try to clean it up.
You already know.
It's everybody.
Right.
Parents, teachers, administrators, board members, everybody that's involved in the education system is responsible for the what we call being able kids to be able to succeed,
right,
or they fail,
right,
because the reason why they succeed is because everybody is doing what they need to do for them to succeed. And when they fail, somewhere along the line, it could be anything. It could be any little thing that comes about, whether it's home, you know what I mean? A lack of something at home or whatever, or you get to school, there's a lack of something in the school. Right. It could be resources, it could be whatever. But everybody who is in the education system is responsible for that child to succeed or fail.
I agree.
Well, I can't do that thing he talking about, bull.
Stop! It's not. No, you can't do that.
I can't do that.
I
know he got it. I know he got it. I know. We know this.
I know. I agree with BJ. I mean, when we talk about, I think that you're right. All of those stars have got to align for success, and I get it. The reality is that too often, all those stars do not align, and that becomes the problem. And see, and that goes to Pruitt's question, and it goes to your response about the priorities. Somebody's got to bring the stars in alignment. Somebody's got to be responsible for, as BJ said, acknowledging that all these different parts have got to fit in the puzzle in order for us to be able to see what the picture is, the final picture. And you're right. So who manages that? You said it, from policy to teachers to resources to buildings to parents to students, all of that. Somebody or somebody's, as the school board, has got to say, okay, my job really is to have peripheral vision and to see it all and to give input or whatever to kind of bring all this together. So I agree with BJ, but I think a part B to Adolphus's question that's going to get to you is I think that there is a very real attack on public education. So the other side of the question, once you finish that, who's attacking public education and why? Because I do believe that there is an attack on public education. So anyway, go ahead, Pruitt. That's my little. Thank you for allowing the group. Thank you, Pruitt. I like the group talk. I like group talk.
Let me be clear about this, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be clear.
BJ, why? Right.
Let me be clear. We have you have a transportation system called Metro. Mm-hmm. It has a board. It has administrators, supervisors, maintenance people who work on the bus and this and that. But when that bus hit the street and the guy is behind the steering wheel.
Or girl.
And there are stops that they have to make at certain intervals and certain times to pick the people up and get them from one stop to another. The person responsible is the guy in the bus with the wheel. Not everybody before him, whether they do their job or not, at the end of the day, if he's behind that wheel and that bus will go forward and move, and he knows his route, she knows where they're supposed to stop, he and she knows who to let on, who not know, all of that. From that point on, the person responsible for the transportation system doing its job is the person that's driving the bus.
I don't agree.
I'm
waiting till you get to the point.
No, if the bus is running, he got a bus, it's got gas in it, it goes, it steers, it's got brakes, it does everything. And if that driver decides I'm not going to I'm supposed to be at this stop at this time, I got 15 minutes in between each stop, I ain't gonna do it. I'm gonna drive slow. I'm gonna sit here and park. For you to say that the administrator is responsible for him making that decision at that point in time, bull.
No.
Go ahead. At that point in time, see, what I'm saying is that person is responsible. And I believe that the teacher who interfaces with that child 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, month in and month out, who gets to know that child, who has to deal with that child, who's supposed to analyze that child to determine their frailty, to determine the things they shorten. I say that person is more responsible than anybody.
And I disagree, but that's okay. See, I'm progressive and he's not, so we have this conflict every now and then. And it's going to you because I think it does have to go to you, the school board person, because I understand Pruitt's point. If I'm driving the bus, I'm responsible for driving the bus. But as the administrator, policymaker, I need to make sure that whoever's behind that wheel meets all the qualifications, able to do this, blah, blah, blah.
You've done all of that.
No.
They driving now. They in the
bus. Go ahead.
Can I interject?
Yes, because you know how we go.
I'm a former. Listen, I worked in education. So, all right, so I'm going to tell you the reason why that, yes, to your point.
And you have to jump in.
To your point, I'm going to agree with you to a certain extent.
Okay.
Yes,
I can live with that.
The teacher is responsible. But if something happens with that child, right, and the proper discipline or whatever doesn't happen with that child, that teacher loses their ability to teach that child, because now the teacher and the student is in a back and forth. If the teacher does not have the proper resources they need to teach the children, then the teacher cannot do their job properly. So the teacher is not. This is stuff that's out of their hands, which
Come on, Dr. BJ.
Which all of this has to work together. If it's like I said, then you have the situation where the teacher is trying to do something with the child. Now the parent comes in and they're getting at the teacher, and then the teacher can't do their job now because the parent is trying to make the teacher the problem. The teacher is, yes, to your point, all this stuff, if it's going perfectly, yes, it's their responsibility to teach the child. But they can't do it if, in fact, that these other sources out here are not doing what they're supposed to do to make sure that teacher can teach effectively.
Well, AJ, this question really is yours. No, 'cause I disagree. I disagree, but I want to make sure we get her in.
Yeah. I think the bus analogy is going off the assumption that every single thing, every single system is functioning properly, is moving forward, and you have the right people actually paying attention to it. Now, that's an ideal world because that doesn't happen on the buses, and it definitely doesn't happen in school districts. And so to the point that who's to blame
No,
or
responsible.
who's responsible?
Who's
Okay,
responsible?
okay. Who's responsible? I think the person responsible for that is the superintendent. The school board.
Who you choose?
Yes.
Who the school board
Who the
chooses.
school
All right,
board
come on now.
chooses and hires,
Well.
which should be, again, in collaboration with community, but we oftentimes don't see that.
Okay.
The person responsible for setting student outcomes, goals for the district, visions and missions for the district is the superintendent.
Right, understood.
The school board has to ensure or supervise and make sure that the superintendent is hitting his or her impact goals. For this case in St. Louis Public Schools, her. And so if you have a superintendent that, one, doesn't know the community, didn't really come up with that vision or mission, and they're just adopting it or just coming in and saying, okay, I'm just going to work with what I have, there are no measures in place to ensure that you even care about making impacts the way that we describe it as a community, the way that we figured out, because that's what it's supposed to be.
And what I want from my school board representatives are, and I understand the superintendent is responsible for the operations, which everything under the superintendent responsible for. But as you said, the school board has a responsibility to make sure that they are vetting
Yep.
the superintendent so that this superintendent is as close enough to what they need, because no one is going to be perfect.
Nobody's going to be
But
perfect.
is as close enough. And so it does go back. And so I want a school board that has the capacity, the competence, and the compassion. You can write that down. If you can use that on the slogan. I mean, because that's what I want. Because at the end of the day, to be honest, I as a citizen of Dolphus, I would like to think that I can get to the school board person a lot easier than I can get to the superintendent.
As you should.
Because that's an elected person
Exactly.
that we have chosen to be responsible for our interests. Not necessarily our child,
Yeah.
but our interests. And we all have a vested interest in quality education.
Yeah, so let's be clear.
Okay.
Mr. BJ,
Oh, he went right at you. It's
Miss
not
AJ.
me today. Oh,
Miss
Lord.
AJ,
Oh, at least it's
and
not me.
Reverend.
No, really.
Reverend.
Really, Pruitt. Really.
Reverend Ray.
I thought I was
Let's be
off the
clear.
hook today.
Let's be clear. I'm tell you a story. I'm tell you a quick story, then I'll get to my
Here's a
point.
story about a man named Brady.
No.
Who was busy bringing up three lovely?
No,
that
no,
was
no.
the lovely
I had a-
girl. That was boys. He had three boys, and she had three girls.
I had a great aunt lived to be 98. I buried her when she was 98. She was a school teacher. When she graduated from Cornell, came back to St. Louis, she got engaged and went to work in the St. Louis Public Schools. And they told her, she was talking about her engagement, and they told her that if she got married, she could not teach. See, back then,
What year? Okay.
back then, you could not, a woman, you could not be married and be a teacher in the St. Louis Public Schools.
Oh.
And so she went home and told her fiance he had to leave because she was going to be a teacher, and that's what she come here to do with the rest of her life. And she never married, never had kids, and taught up until taught for I think 40, 50 years and so, and retired. And we used to have these conversations. I remember I'd be talking to her, and we had these conversations, and she was telling me how much influence that the teacher has over the child, and that teachers are in classrooms every day
Yep.
with not the right supplies. They're in classrooms every day with parents that are not in the kids' life. They're in the classroom every day with kids who come from trauma and things like that. And she talked about how teachers had to have that ability to connect with that child and understand, because in some cases that child would have more respect for that teacher and cling to that teacher as they would as a parent.
Right.
And so and she would say all the time, the most important cog in the system is the teachers, that everybody above the teacher can fail. But the teacher still has the ability, if they're a good teacher and they're serious about, dedicated to the craft, that they have the ability to deliver. And she said, I remember her talking about, we got kids with ADHD and all these other things. She said they existed back then, but teachers were able to identify it, and they were able to work with those kids, and those kids were still able to succeed without a lot of the stuff that they have now. And so all I'm saying is that I believe that teachers have the ultimate responsibility for making sure that child learns. And if the child is in an environment where they don't have the resources, the child's in an environment where the school building is no good, all these other things, then the teacher has to become the strongest advocate out here to demand that those things be put in place and things of that nature. And we just don't allow that anymore because they're too afraid about getting their jobs, or the unions are controlling them and stuff like that. But that's the breakdown. So that's my 2 cents.
I don't totally disagree with that. My mother was a teacher, and if I hadn't chosen the path that I chose, I wanted to teach junior high school. So I don't disagree with you. I mean, listen, my hat's off. Well, it's off right now anyway. But I take my hat off to teachers. I think that you're absolutely right. I think teachers are by far, and I'm not discounting preachers because I'm a preacher, but probably the most influential people in the life of any person. I remember Miss Bunch from grade 2. I remember Miss Oliver from grade 3. I remember Miss Crockett from grade 4. I remember Mr. Threet from grade 8. So you're right. So you're absolutely. But
they had names like that in the prehistoric days.
Stop it! I had a what is it? A snagger-tooth tiger. I had a tiger. You had a dinosaur, man. I had to ride in on a tiger, man. But I guess what I don't want to do, and particularly because it is a school board race, and you're right, I don't want any school board candidate or representative to think that they could ever abdicate. And Pruitt, you're right. We know those teachers, but the teacher needs to know that if I need these resources, regardless of the union, regardless of whatever whatever the problems may be, that somewhere out there is a school board that respects and understands and willing to support what Pruitt just said about teachers.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with that.
Daryl, we're gonna take a quick break. Daryl
go
was on the road.
Professor Doctor. I didn't even do anything this time.
They got it. Break came right was it was because I want to win the argument. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with more on Point Blank. We're back. We got in the studio with us AJ Foster,
Sister
young lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking charge. It's your turn anyway. It's y'all's turn. And so with your generation, it's your turn. We are post Mike Brown. We're post George Floyd. We're post Sandra Bland. It's y'all's turn. Pruitt had an interesting question. He said, if you had 10 minutes to sell yourself and your candidacy, give us your elevator speech.
Yeah. Like I said, I am a proud product of public education, St. Louis Public Schools, through and through, and have dedicated pretty much my entire professional career in studying what it means to govern effectively, to govern tactically, and not just regular entities or nonprofits, but specifically schools and school boards. And so I believe that it is more imperative now to have school board members who are equipped with what day-to-day operations look like in St. Louis public schools, who know what committee structures are, how to fix committee structures, quite frankly, in our current district, and then also who really care about student voice. Oftentimes we are comparing education and experiences from decades and decades and decades ago. But if you ask the average junior or senior in high school what they want schools to look like, you won't get the answer that you think in your head. You really won't. And so I think it's important that school board members vote towards policies or abstain or vote no, right? For policies and changes that are going to benefit our students, that are going to make our students want to stay in St. Louis, live in St. Louis, work in St. Louis, and raise their families in St. Louis. Again, I think that right now one of our biggest challenges is figuring out why we don't have equitable contracts and why aren't they outcomes based. Most contracts that our district is signing is not outcomes based, and that's why our students aren't improving. We're continuously giving money to vendors. We're continuously spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, but there's no progress being shown. Our literacy rates are still low, and I'm not going to say the deficit number that we always hear in the media. I think we all know it, but I think, again, we have to answer to that in the terms of, okay, if we're going to hire somebody to come into our district and work with our students day to day, it needs to be evidence behind why we're hiring them. Right. We have to have, it has to be based in research. And I think because, again, my experience both professionally and just my passion, right, is in education. It's an education policy. And I don't believe that you need to have a formal degree to study it or know what you're doing. If you put in the work, you show up every day, you learn about it, you think about it strategically, you'll know what decisions need to be making. And so, and I think another reason, like selling myself, most of our school board members have kiddos, and they're like, we have kids in the district, and we love our district. We've been volunteering as parents, and I applaud them. Hats off to them as well. But because I don't have kids in the district, I'm not biased towards any school. I'm not biased towards any program here in St. Louis. I want the same thing for Vashon as I do for Metro. I want the same thing for Sodan as I do for Roosevelt.
You
right?
didn't mention Sumner there.
So,
I mean, you didn't mention Sumner in there. I mean, I think that BJ, I think she should at least mention Sumner. I'm just saying.
I mean, every school, right? And so making sure that we have school board members who are governing in the interests of children and staff and faculty, and not from old politics. I think that's what we're seeing a lot, and not just in our school board. It's old politics.
Old politics.
Old politics.
I like that.
And it's at the detriment of our students.
Yeah. Would you support increasing teacher salary?
Oh, for sure.
I just had to get that on the record. I just got a text from some of my teachers union people, and they told me they need to make sure that I ask you that question.
I definitely would support that. Okay. In my earlier career, when I moved back to St. Louis, that was my biggest role, was advocating for teachers to have higher salaries, to get more professional development, specifically in St. Louis public schools. And so definitely I'm a big advocate for increasing teacher salary.
You know, a lot of people, Pruitt has really pushed this. I mean, we talk about, particularly during election season, you know, we talk about the glamorous races, the ones where candidates are raising a whole lot of money and they got commercials and this and that. But we don't talk about enough school board races. And it seems though across this country, it is the public school boards that are beginning to get more attention. I think because of the attack on public education.
For sure.
You know, taking out Black History Month and, you know, taking
banning
books and all this foolishness going on. And I understand that they just confirmed the WWE chief executive's wife as the Secretary for Education, and they're saying her job is to eliminate the Department of Education. Seemed to me that the job is to eliminate public education, particularly if you put the onus back on the states to control education.
Well, I mean,
that's and excuse me, Ms. Pruitt, but that's one thing too. Like people are all over the media saying the state needs to take over the board. The state needs to take over St. Louis public schools. It didn't work the first time, so what makes you think it's going to work the second time?
That's what I was trying to get to. So
if we have people at the State Department right now who are publicly saying that they want St. Louis public schools unaccredited by the year 2027, why would we want a state takeover? Why would we be supporting a state takeover if they already don't want our schools to be accredited? It doesn't make sense.
I believe it's not that they don't want our schools to be accredited. Adolphus says it all the time. They don't want our children to learn.
For sure.
well, you know, the prior to Department of Education and everything else, prior to board, Brown versus the Board of Education, separate but equal. And so I don't think public education is going anywhere. And a lot of folks say it's under attack. I don't think it's under attack. I just think they want to go back to segregated schools where they want to say, we want to be responsible for our kids and you be responsible for yours.
Be careful with that too, though, Pruitt, because I'm a proponent. Hey, listen, I was raised in a segregated environment. I was raised in a segregated school. I never had a problem with those black teachers because there was no social promotions. So
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying I'm just saying that's the direction that I think they're pushing to take things back to.
I hear you.
When they want to ban books in school,
make America white again.
Yeah, their thing with banning books in school, I disagree with it. But their thing is we don't want our little white children to know how vicious our ancestors were.
Lord, Pruitt, you better
to people.
stop.
Yeah, I mean that's
you're
it.
right, though. But you're right.
I don't want great grandpa's stuff in the closet to come out the closet to find out that he was raping black women and whipping black men and castrating them.
You talking about me preaching?
I'm just saying. I mean, so I don't think so. I don't want folks to get the mix up when they said attack on public education. It's attack on what they want their kids to learn about and what they don't want them to learn about. Because if the books were not there, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Yeah.
But when it would start teaching their kids the true history, then now it's a problem because they don't want
it's what they learn.
Yeah, they don't want
learn.
People to see great grandpa and great grandma on the picture and say, wow, I didn't know Grandpa was doing that. That's kind of wild. You know, that's weird. Yeah. Mama, what was up?
I didn't know Grandpa had a hood. BJ, I didn't know Grandpa had a hood. So that's what that is.
Yeah, no, that's all this. That's what it. But here's my question to you: is this? What role does data play in a school board making decisions about its district and how children learn? Because I believe in data. I believe data tells you everything. But I don't know if BJ shaking his head, but he believes in data when it comes to the ratings on his radio show. They look at the numbers. They look at the numbers. They look at the numbers.
Hallelujah.
And they break them down demographically and tell you what age, what color.
Counting is important. BJ, counting is important.
What you think about data?
Yeah, I think that data should inform every single decision a school board makes, but you have to know how to read the data. Just because it's saying X amount of students aren't passing this or X amount of do we know that maybe 70% of those students are transfer students every year, or they switch schools, or they're transient, or their families are moving from the county to the city, so the curriculum is different? You have to be able to not only look at numbers, but be able to tell a story about those numbers. And I will put a caveat, that responsibility is on the superintendent to be able to communicate that. Right. But as an elected school board member, you should know how to read the information as well and come prepared. So when you are making votes on behalf of children, on behalf of students and families, you got to know that there's some stories behind this data. whether it's good or bad.
Well,
ahead,
AJ,
BJ.
you gonna take us out? That was a good. Hey, look at
Yeah,
it.
that was
She's
good.
coming.
I'm telling you,
she's
for
coming
somebody
with
that
the stuff.
graduated in 2016, you on fire, Miss Foster. People better remember that name, Miss Foster, not just for school board, but their better days are coming.
Well,
but
listen,
go ahead, BJ.
It's been wonderful having you here. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and you even impressed Reverend Gray. So you really doing something, because he went back to grade school and started naming every damn teacher he done had since 1865. I mean, BJ. I mean, I don't know had the teachers I had. I don't know all the man. Go, ladies and gentlemen,
Man,
we gonna
I
get
had
up out of
coffee
here.
in my mouth when you did that. Hey, BJ.
We gonna get up out of here. We'll see you
Oh,
next
my
week.
God.
Thank you for being with us. Take care.